Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.
Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. With me today is Brandon Barksdale, CEO of Dalwhinnie Farms. Thank you very much for joining me today.
No problem.
All right, before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. Finally, to reach the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com. I'd like to get started by learning a little bit about what brought you to the cannabis industry. Day one, what was it that made you jump in?
Well, interestingly enough, I was a practice leader in a public accounting firm. And so, as you might know, the public accounting space touches a wide variety of industries, and a very select few have chosen to create a staple industry practice that focuses on the cannabis industry. And so I was delegated and appointed to lead our advisory finance and accounting area of our cannabis industry group. And from there, really delved in. And even prior to that, I had some light experience in the cannabis space from an industry perspective as well. And so in being able to work with and touch a number of cannabis clients, it was something where I saw a real area of opportunity that was specific around, increasing operational excellence and maturity in the cannabis industry. And that had been a huge part of my background, just from an industry agnostic perspective. And so being able to take those experiences and dive it specifically into the cannabis space was one of the exciting things that had me, kind of jump the fence over to the other side.
What were some of those industries from an operational perspective?
There were numbers, retail, manufacturing, which there's a ton of synergies, if you can imagine, as well as, technology and fintech as well. So, as the cannabis industry is growing and expanding its footprint, like a lot of these different industries are starting to make their way into cannabis, right? And so being able to have a broad perspective of it, I think is important, but at the same time, being able to apply the changes and the development that's happening, specifically to the cannabis industry, and how to best use that industry knowledge to really better the industry, I think is kind of where the silver lining and the magic is.
No, I completely agree. Coming from a manufacturing background as well, when you go into some of those facilities, kind of just want to say, they've written a playbook about this already, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so it's interesting because a ton of resources that are in and excelling in the cannabis space, might not have came from, a broad variety of backgrounds. Like, a lot of them were growers, before and maybe have been in horticulture before, but being able to look at, operational excellence and metrics as it relates to, costing methodologies, as it relates to, different type of Kaizen methodologies, as it relates to process improvement and how to become more lean, I think are elements that are making their way into the cannabis space, but, definitely have some room to continue to get better.
So coming from the finance side, what was the evolution like as you took larger and larger roles, in startups and in larger MSOs?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, my background was finance and accounting, more specifically like transformation. And so transformation is really taking a organization from its current state and maturing them into a higher realm of operational excellence. And so creating, more mature controls, creating more mature processes that drive, that drive and align with the complexities of operations as companies look to expand from startup / mom and pop to multi-state operators, and what those synergies are from a compliance perspective, how to centralize certain corporate functions that are compliance driven, like, HR, accounting, finance, how to create synergies with operations, reporting, ERP systems. There's a lot there. And so, I think, as I navigated through the startups and into the MSOs are more closely aligned with the more mature industries because there's more mature capital entering the space. And with more mature capital entering the space, the expectations of, how you're managing that capital and how you're monitoring performance also heightens as well.
In manufacturing, when a lot of the Kaizen lean manufacturing principles came in, there was already this legacy of hundreds of years of how we've always done things. And there's, as a result, there's that pushback when people introduce these new methodologies. However, in cannabis, are you getting the same pushback, or because it's such a young industry, is the industry still looking for the best way to do things?
Yeah, I think the industry is still looking for the best way to do things in a practical manner, right? Like, I think that, people are still inching and taking, I wouldn't say baby steps, but smaller steps, right? Towards, some of the practices that are already tried and true, right? I mean, when you look at cultivation, horticulture, like decisions made today, have implications 4 or 5 months down the road, right? And so being able to tread lightly and then also to nurture and develop talent in that direction, I think is something that the industry is starting to really fold into. Some are a lot further than others, but at the end of the day, I think people are starting to see why that's important. And so, when people introduce, they're not new concepts, they're old concepts. But to a new industry, there's a learning curve, right? And so, a lot of the young talent out there, they want to see it proofed out. Why are we capturing all this data? Why does it make sense right now? And seemingly in the moment, it seems like a ton of work. But, in the bigger picture and the aggregate, it's super important in trying to identify trends, identifying where efficiencies can be made, identifying where you're over or underperforming at, and how to continue to get better and better. And that's what it is all about. It's about that continuous cycle of improvement. Even when you're great, you could be better. And data analytics and maturity of how you capture and execute that is the key principle.
Before you got to Dalwhinnie, what were can you give me some examples of when you took a company from an operational perspective and really sort of, for lack of a better term, kind of trimmed the fat?
Yeah. I can think of a number of ways. I'll probably try to explain, a scenario where, it was less of a resource reduction and more of a, we can just button up from a process perspective. I mean, a lot of times, there's a ton of redundancy, right, in organizations. There's redundancies as it relates to processes, repeated, manual tasks and activities. And it's not really until you start to document those things and see what the particular outcome of those processes are to determine, well, are we doing things more than we need to, right? Or are we replicating the same task and decreasing the efficiency of our talent? And so, a lot of times when someone comes in and assess, you can do a very high level assessment, or you can really drive into the details of what everybody's output is, and then work your way backwards from, output and who's receiving that information or that product all the way through to what the inputs were. And so when you start to see people kind of replicating inputs and replicating certain activities, it's very easy to start to see, all right, well, if this group is capturing this information and this group is recapturing the same information, how about we just synthesize that? And so, in those activities of assessment, it's very, very obvious and easy to identify how and where you can kind of create some efficiencies at, and repurpose that energy to do more productive activity like analysis or plant work, or anything. So
I was glad that you said that, because sometimes when I hear efficiencies, sometimes that makes you immediately think like, oh, well, that means somebody had to go.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely quite the opposite. It's just making sure the talent that you have, and rightfully so, if you're on board of that talent, there's some value proposition, right, for them being there. And a lot of times people get bogged down with the manual, day-to-day activities that don't really provide any value, that, drive them to become less effective. And so, in those instances, if you could repurpose that talent to be more effective, why wouldn't you want to?
When you're looking at the operations for an overall organization, are some of the, are you a proponent of bringing more automation into the plant or the facility to make things more efficient?
I am. I mean, I think where you can create automation, or where you can put automation, and decrease, touch costs, I think it definitely impacts the bottom line. I think where you can do that, where it doesn't impede on quality and the practices of, what your brand or company holds to, the highest standard or highest values, is the balancing act, right? It's what's the right automation, right? And the automation that still drives quality, but also doesn't, again, impede on some of the values that, every company's not the same. Some have different values than others. Us at Dalwhinnie, we really care about the practices that go into cultivation. Also making sure that our customers get the best and the cleanest product that we possibly can grow. And so, sometimes automation cuts some corners. And so we prefer to create more of a hands-on approach to certain things. But in other cases, automation is helpful and decreases, touch costs, and also improves, cleanliness and how, products make it to market consistently and effectively. So it's just a balancing act.
That was my follow-up question, because Dalwhinnie is such a luxury brand. Where have you found a fit for automation in your operations? What type of equipment?
Well, I won't get too specific.
Understood. Yeah.
But, I think, automation and feeding and irrigation, right? That kind of decreases human error, right? Like, I think that is definitely, an area that I'm sure everybody kind of sees some level of benefit. Programmatic implementations that will allow for timing and also dynamic schedules as well are also super important. Automation on the post-production side, it's kind of, it depends on a company's palette, for what they're trying to drive to market. But being that we have differing levels of brands, right? Like, some brands in the future, there may be a trigger to want to push automation to keep costs down, to make it, still a attainable, product base for a certain market or target market for your particular brand or company. And then there might be a more costly manual way of doing something that, kind of speaks to more of like the connoisseur or the craft consumer that you're appealing to. And so I think it just really truly depends. But for us, it's where, automation can decrease human error to make sure we're able to get the same level of quality out consistently to the marketplace, that allows us to drive production and growth.
How did you come to the opportunity at Dalwhinnie?
Interestingly enough, it was just relationship based. And so, being a leader in a cannabis industry practice in a large public accounting firm, you meet a ton of people. And so, interestingly enough, and it's probably no shock to anyone listening to this, there's definitely a shortage of quality talent, right? And so there's always not always a need, but there's always room for someone kind of seeking out like that, qualified individual that brings a different perspective that allows you to take your organization to the next stage or place of growth. And so I think luckily enough, like, Dalwhinnie was in a specific point in its life cycle where, it could have benefited from some of my prior experiences and also the transformational background that I have in terms of being able to drive operational excellence. And as we look to grow and expand and drive a larger footprint for our brands, it's super important that we look to the future, not only from what we're capable of doing today, but also how we continue to get better and better. That continuous cycle of improvement, like I talked about.
What is in the Dalwhinnie family of companies?
The Dalwhinnie family of companies consists of Dalwhinnie Farms. That would be our our estate line, and that is also associated with our dispensary that we have in Pickens County in Aspen, Colorado. We also have Shift Genuine Cannabis, which has a huge footprint on the Front Range in Denver and surrounding areas as well. And we also have Ridgeway Hemp Company, which is a hemp line that we use that kind of has a tie into polo and various athletics and wellness. So those would be our three brands that we are currently in market with, and kind of have a couple other under development as well.
What is the current size of the company? You talk about thoughts on expansion, stuff like that. How big is the company now? What markets are you serving, and what are you looking for in the future?
Yeah, so currently we're a single state operator. And so we currently only focus on Colorado. And so we have a single retail channel that's in Aspen, Colorado. And so we get a ton of transient traffic and also a ton of locals as well that support, Dalwhinnie and the family of brands as well. But that transient traffic coming in and out also drives a particular market opportunity because people are familiar with the brand, right? And so through the busier seasons in Aspen, people are experiencing our products, experiencing our brand, and then going back to their respective, cities, countries, whatever, and kind of remembering. And so we see that as a bridge of potential expansion and where we could go, where people are already familiar with the brand. We also have brand recognition in a multitude of towns and cities in Colorado as well. Denver, Grand Junction, right outside of Denver, like the Commerce City area, Parachutes, and so Boulder. And so for us, we definitely want to continue to expand that and increase the footprint in a way that's strategic, that kind of aligns with, what we're capable of doing production wise, and also being able to be reactive to the market with what the market needs as well. And so along with our cultivation facility, we also have our manufacturing plant that's right outside of Denver as well. And so, that's where all of our concentrates and waxes and other things are developed. And so we're just really trying to make sure that we consistently can bring the best quality product to market. And so being able to do that and expand at the right pace is really what we're focused on, without interrupting the consumer experience.
Are you able to scale up in your current footprint with your current capabilities, or is it going to take a little bit of investment in new equipment and human resources?
Truthfully, probably across the board, but I think we have enough room for growth, organically with our current structure as it stands, right? Like, I mean, I think we could probably, we probably could double down pretty easily. But being able to do that with the right resource support, again, and focusing on that quality to market is super critical for us. And so, if there's any possibility of scaling and kind of putting the cart before the horse, no pun intended, with our equestrian branding, but it's truthfully what we think about the most. And so, when the time is right, I think we would consider that, but we are doing our best to maximize production as it currently stands right now. And I think everyone knows that the market is currently doing its volatility thing. And so, it's really about timing and making sure the time is right, and also making sure you're prepared, right, and that the market's prepared to be able to consume and also absorb what that would look like for the brand as well. And so, we have a ton of exciting things under development. Like our biggest thing has always been about wellness and about making this fun, right? I mean, like, we're in the business of cannabis, like, it's supposed to be fun to grow the business. It's supposed to be about wellness and allowing people to use products that better their lives. And so, that's always something that's, again, on the forefront of what we're thinking about. And so if there's any, way that we can look at expansion and broadening that reach, still being very particular about, how we select and grade our cultivars, what our terpene and cannabinoid profiles look like, and where certain things belong in our branding structure. I think as we continue to mature in that and understand how the market reacts to that and the changes that have been made over the last year or two, I think that's really when we'll be able to pivot to, how we want to, expand and grow on a production level.
How do you expand and keep it fun without going corporate?
The sensitive line, right? It's tough. It is very tough. It's a very cutthroat market out there, and it is a challenge. But I think when you stick to your roots, right, you stick to what you know, and what you do well, and if it's growing quality cannabis, you do that well. If it's being able to appeal to the masses, then you do that well. And so, I think, a lot of times, like, with larger MSOs, like they'll create like third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth level of like product categories and brands within their, within their umbrella. And I think that is amazing if you can do it and focus on all the things that are super important, like quality, like consistency, and be able to drive that in a transparent manner that, that consumers enjoy. And so for us, we're doing the corporate buildup, right, to create the controls and the structure that we'll need to expand. And as we look, into other territories and states, to push the brand to, that's definitely something that we're constantly thinking about and that we're constantly evaluating, is like, who's the right partner that's not going to make this so much focused on the bottom line, but also focused around the quality of the product that's being put out in the marketplace, and do it in a way that focuses on wellness, where we are having a good time, and being able to stay true to what we are as a brand.
So as you're looking as you're looking to expand into new territories and states, because you're a luxury or a high-end brand, are you looking to expand into saturated markets where there's more of the discerning customer that's looking for more of a high-end product? Just because I hear of other people that kind of stay away from new states because basically anything that you can get on the shelf is going to go.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. I mean, I think, we want to be in the markets that will receive our brand well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think that's the bottom line. And so when I look at a market that's overly saturated, like we would stand out, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I look at a market that is newly online, if we felt that market fit our plan, I think that market would benefit by our products being on the shelf because of what our brand drives, and it creates that bar, right? Well, if this is the baseline of what we expect, then this is where Shift is, or this is where Dalwhinnie Farms is, and it constantly pushes the market, right? So I don't think there's necessarily like a newer market that we're not interested in moving towards, because I think with what we're trying to bring from branding, from a partnership perspective, there's room for it across the board. And that's really what we did when we established, the company was focused on how we can get our story of where we grow pot and the most beautiful part of what we would say the country,
Mm-hmm.
and really get people to experience that. I mean, you think about it like the equivalent to like a wine or something like that, right? Like, I mean, where we grow is very different from where other growers grow, right? It's has its own challenges, but at the same time, it creates its own uniqueness. And that uniqueness is what we correlated to when we picked our first dispensary location. It correlates to, the particular strains that we grow. It speaks to our path and focus when we're doing pheno hunts and when we're breeding. And, I think being able to share that story in various markets, newer and more mature, is a story in itself. So,
talking about your grow, can you tell me a little bit about your cultivation philosophy as a company?
Yeah, our cultivation philosophy is simple. I mean, it's again about growing in the most natural and organic way that we possibly can to get the cleanest product to market. We fact check our SOPs. We know everything that goes into our plants. We know what creates or gets as closest to the repetitive terpene profile and cannabinoid profiles that we search for within specific strains, and to create the experience, right? Like a lot of people, from a consumer perspective, not an industry, look at like THC, right? And everything's so focused around THC, but we know it's more than that. And so, being able to not only educate, the consumer, but make sure it follows all the way through to our practices and how we select certain cultivars and strains is super important for us. And it goes into kind of the DNA of how we choose to grow and to operate. And so we're always thinking about sustainability. We're always thinking about how to create a lighter footprint with what we do. And so, I mean, our picture is, our cultivation picture is again about creating the lightest footprint with the highest quality product in the cleanest possible way, right? And we make decisions that are tough ones, because we're very, very strict on ourselves. We are our toughest critics, and so we know when product leaves our facility, it is the cleanest, it is of the highest quality it possibly can be before it leaves our door, right? Or we just won't sell it. And so, I think a lot of, not every operator is like that. There are some, but, I think as companies get larger and larger, like that premise kind of starts to disappear. And I'm sure you've probably seen or at least heard that as well. And so, that's just something where we're trying to stick very, very closely to our ethics and to our beliefs of what a great craft cannabis brand is.
What are some of those tough decisions that you've had to make?
I mean, I don't think we need to get into it here, but I mean, I think those decisions come when, people are faced with tougher, economic times and, as it relates to like, AMR and what prices are in the marketplace and the volatility. It's like, sometimes you have decisions of what product you're going to put out in the marketplace and what you're going to continue to do to, that material that differs from what you would do if the market price was double, triple what it currently is. And so, people are faced with those decisions today, right? Like as, the market, kind of has hit a little bear place and is slowly creeping its way back up. A lot of operators had to make decisions that were different from what they would typically do. Right. And so those are the decisions that I'm referencing. But,
Gotcha.
I think, as markets become more mature and retail kind of continues to consolidate and eventually states will open up. I mean, this is going to be something that, the industry will feel for quite some time.
You talk about having a lighter footprint from an environmental perspective. How often are you evaluating lighting and other systems and upgrading to have less of an impact?
Every day.
Yep.
Every day. I think that, in order for you to stay on the cutting edge of how to produce and how to grow and how to do it the right way, understanding the technology that's available is important. Understanding how to create a lighter, energy, oil, environmental impact is super important. We try to use the elements that come natural to us in Colorado, snow melts, reservoirs to help kind of fuel irrigation and things like that. And so, we're constantly thinking about it. We actually built our facility to be able to be versatile in that manner. And so we're constantly, trying to evaluate and again, just stay on the forefront of how, operations impact the environment positively and negatively, and make sure we make the decisions that allow us to do it in a manner that, puts us at least on the leading forefront of how those things are done.
Is it a completely indoor grow?
Yes.
Okay.
We have two facilities on our campus, and one's an entirely indoor grow, and one is an enclosed greenhouse that acts as like an indoor, if you could imagine. I think we get our first freeze in Colorado, in late July, early August.
Yeah.
So, you kind of have to be pretty much enclosed or operate as an indoor. So
yeah, was that this year or last year where that early freeze just hurt a bunch of operators that had stuff outdoors?
Yeah, it's happens all the time, and I think we won't see the lack of surprises anytime soon from a variety of different reasons. But when you look at the regional impacts of weather and what's happening, it's I think for what people used to be able to expect, it's literally like a coin toss at this point.
Right.
Of what you can expect these seasons. So, it's definitely a struggle for some people.
Talking about swapping out some of this equipment on a daily basis, making these decisions, how close to those decisions are you? Are you right? Like when you're specifying equipment, are you giving the final say on that, or do you have management that's more in charge of that?
No, we have a pretty involved management team. I mean, I think for any decision or direction that we make that is, integral to operations, like, equipment changes, improvement, technology decisions, grow practices, SOPs, we're all pretty heavily involved. I don't think this is an industry where you cannot be involved at any level, right? And
Mhm.
so, those things are, kind of where we sit down at the table, early on and kind of look at all of the variables that would go into making decisions, building out a business case, understanding the current state, looking at what potentially the future state could bring with whatever change is being proposed, looking at the realization from benefits on, are these hard benefits that we'll realize in terms of a dollar saving? Are they softer, more like qualitative type of benefits that affect like quality and general, practice improvement or alleviate workload for people and our talent, which is probably the most valuable asset that we have
Yeah.
is the talent that we, that we have. So we always are looking to do things to create, efficiencies for them and also to make, their day-to-day easier as well in a very, cumbersome, labor intensive industry.
It sounded like you had a very aggressive or at least ambitious plan for your first 100 days of CEO. As CEO, did you kind of like let off the gas a little bit, or have you just kind of continued that pace in terms of operational excellence going forward?
Yeah, we went head first into it all. Yeah. So it was, I wouldn't say a wrecking ball, but it was more of a just coming in with an idea of what the objective and the vision is and how that differs from anything that's been done in the past and really honing in on driving that change while also uplifting the culture, right? And making it a place where people want to be, right? And so I think across the industry, the cultural piece is so important too, right? On how you manage talent, how do you create, various kind of like professional progression programs, right? For people to constantly know that there's something that they're working towards. And so for us, that's super important. And so, not only are we, looking to be very clear on people's roles and responsibilities and align accountability, but also looking past that for, what does career trajectory look like, right? And really trying to hone in and nurture the talent that we carry. And that's super, super important for us. And so, as much as it was kind of a realignment of focus when I came on board, it was also, really about nurturing the amazing talent that we already had in house that was delivering very high quality product and really focusing on, well, how do we continuously get better? How do we elevate the bar of operational excellence and organization and making data-driven decisions, focusing on analytics and creating that consistency that the market can look toward as a again as a leading brand in the country.
How involved are you in terms of watching what's going on in the country in terms of states coming online and expectations? Do you kind of keep a keen eye on what's going on?
Yeah, coming from a professional service background, I mean, I'm very, very used to just keeping a pulse on just industry news in general, because it does impact, it might not feel like it impacts you right away, but ultimately it does. And so being able to keep a pulse on the industry at large, I think is very important. So we're always looking at, different legislation, compliance factors that are changing, new states that are coming online. Interestingly enough, seeing how those new states that come online evolve, right? Like that's always entertaining for me, just to kind of see people kind of go through the same growing pains that more mature markets had already went through.
Oh, yeah.
And so, I think, it's definitely something that we have to, as industry professionals, kind of always have at least a peripheral view of, and also seeing where you can learn. I mean, this is a newer industry comparatively, and being able to, work with your peer group and being able to share information and not be, so secretive about your challenges, and helping people nurture and grow is the only way you progress the industry. And so, I would like to consider myself an open book, but I do know that best practices come from experience and come from sharing. And so that's really what, we always try to nurture in any type of collaborative professional environment. That's something that I always try to push and encourage.
As you look to expand, what are some of those emerging markets or states that are coming online that you find exciting?
Well, I'd be excited when the whole country's online. That would be nice. But
when's that going to happen?
Who knows, man? If you asked me 5 years ago, I would have said it this year.
Right.
So time will tell. But I think what'll happen in the tri-state area is going to be pretty groundbreaking for the cannabis industry. I think states that are similar to the tri-state area will also see some progression. As the Pacific Northwest becomes more mature, I could definitely see, some similarities with how, they'll start to operate and create cohesion across states. And so I'm really excited about that, new states coming online. That's awesome. I think we've seen that in and out. But really, I'm more interested in how states and even municipalities will start to work together to create some cohesion. And I think that has to happen first. And then ultimately, the broader lift that, we're all looking towards and expecting.
Coming from a diverse background in multiple industries, are you in cannabis to stay?
Yeah, I'm here, man. I think it's definitely, one of those things where, if you asked me 10 years ago, would this be where I'm at? I probably would have said probably not. But ultimately, I think there's a lot of room for growth. I think there's a lot of room for opportunity, and there's definitely a maturation that needs to happen, right? And it's happening as we speak, but the more we're able to embed, people from broader industry backgrounds into the cannabis industry, and then also elevate the individuals in the cannabis industry and the people who have already, by way of experience, elevated themselves, into the roles that they're in. I think we'll start to see a very rapid maturity. I think the capital that's coming in is more mature as well, and so that drives a level of expectation too. And so with like this web of broader industry experience, the experience gained by cannabis operators and cultivation experts that, have seen this in and out of multiple states, and how that kind of bubbles up. And now you have the structured capital kind of raining down, and the expectation levels are going both ways. I really think that there's an education that's happening, right before our eyes, that's going to really, really wrap this industry into a very mature kind of nest that is going to be very, very beneficial across the board. And a lot of the noise that used to flood the industry is really getting sifted out quickly. And I think everybody has either come across or dealt with that noise. And so, truthfully, there's there's definitely, room for continued growth. And I'm extremely happy with the family I have at Dalwhinnie. And so, I'm really, really looking forward to growing the organization into this next phase of life cycle, as we're in growth mode, and ultimately, the impact that'll even have on the rest of the industry. And so looking forward to continue to share my knowledge as far as it'll go and be received. And yeah, just looking forward to the future. So,
well, thank you very much for joining me today, Brandon. I really do appreciate it. Before we get out of here, is there anything that we might have missed, or anything in particular you want to make sure the CEN audience knows about Dalwhinnie?
Come try us out. I mean, I think that's the only thing that comes to mind. A lot of people, hear the buzz of different brands, and I mean, I think for sure when people experience our product, it's one of those, wow, and we always, get the individuals coming back and inquiring and want to know more, and what makes us, so special. What makes where we grow so unique, and that, and I think that is definitely something that I would encourage people to, come learn more about our story. Awesome. But outside of that, if you're in Aspen, come check out the dispensary. It's probably one of the most unique dispensaries I've ever been to, and I've been in a ton of them.
Yeah.
And so
just looking at photos of it, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's absolutely stunning. And so, it's not your typical dispensary experience. And so, when you step in, it's definitely, eye-opening. And then to match that with the quality of products that we, hand select to make it to that shelf space is pretty awesome of an experience. So
awesome, man. Well, I hope you get a chance to check it out sometime as well. And thank you again for your time. I'm really excited to see what comes down the line from Dalwhinnie. All right. You good? You think we get out of here?
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. Hope we get to do it again, at some point in the future. And just really appreciate you reaching out.
Before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. Finally, if you want to reach the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com. All right. For Brandon Barksdale, I'm David Manti. This is the Cannabis.
Thank you for listening to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.